It's good, it's good, it's good. Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning Yerushalmi Peah, Pedig Vav, Halacha Gimel, and Dalit. We will be learning today Daf Nun Dalit, and we left off on Daf Nun Dalit, Amid Aleph, 6 lines from the top of the Amid by the dot, Rabbi Yehuda Berivi. Now, let's quickly review what we learned on Daf Nun Gimel. The Gemara gave a case. If you remember, we made a beautiful drawing that a person has a row of oimorim, of bundles, picked up 1, picked up 2, picked up 3. The number 4, the second scenario was, it was a very big bundle, tall. Somehow the person picked up the bottom part of it, Sad Tachtoin. They left at Sad Elyon. As we spoke out, there must have been some sort of support which allows you to take out the bottom without the top falling down. And then the person forgot number 5 and number 6. Then they picked up number 7. If we're going to consider that Sad Elyon, 1 that's equal to 5 and 6, which means now you forgot 3, none of it is Shekha. If we're going to say, no, the Sad Elyon is soft, it's floating, doesn't count, so then you only forgot 2. This doesn't count, then this will be Shekha. That was a boya, that was an inquiry that the Gemara left unresolved. From there, the Gemara said this beautiful story, how Rav, one time, he came in bubble. He made a statement like the Gemara says, Ben Azai said in Tiberia, who once went in there and said that I'm so clear, you can ask me any question that you want from any part of Torah, and I'll give you the answer. Rav gave that the challenge. And an elder, we said perhaps in Bavli, Sov, where Sova goes to Eliyahu Navi, perhaps felt that maybe Rav did not need to make such a statement, which could be understood as there was some haughtiness in it, asked me about anything, and he asked him a question regarding Egla Rufa. Egla Rufa, that if you have 2 corpses laying one on top of the other, and from one corpse, the closest city is A, from the bottom corpse, the closest city is B, we measure from the nose. So now the question is, what happens when Negeya, which city has to bring an Egla Arufa? So Rav Paskent, since min b'minoi eino choitzitz, so therefore it's considered as if we have 2 egla rufas, both cities have to bring. The elder tells Rav that you're wrong. Why are you wrong? And that's how it's linked, and that's why we have to review this to Chab today's Gemara. That since the Gemara says ki yimatzeh cholol basodem, so we have 2 limudim. Basodem means on the field. The corpse on the top is not on the field. It's like the Tzad Elyon. The one on the bottom is tamun. It's not exposed, basada. It's hidden. Now, it's above the earth, but it's covered with another corpse. So the Sav told Rav, you're wrong. Neither cities have to bring. Rav came back to Eretz Yisrael. This was when Rav still lived there. Rabbi, Rabbeinu HaKadosh was still alive. He told Rabbi what happened. Rabbi told him, you're both right, which means, or you're both wrong. You paskin that both have to bring. No, you're wrong. The elder was right. But the reason that the elder gave you is wrong. You're right. Min b'minoi eino choitzitz. Since min b'minoi eino choitzitz, it's not called saf. It's not called tamun. Navros then, the Torah says, ki yimatzei, when a corpse is found b'loshin yachid, which excludes 2 corpses or 3 corpses or more, then the Torah would have says, ki yimatzu and it doesn't say that. That's where we left off. Now we have to remember this concept of Talmud because that's going to be negeya to the sugya of today. But before we come back to Talmud, the Gemara is going to begin This is the Rabbi Yehuda Beribi, the great Rabbi Yehuda. We're going to have new cases regarding the three shaft row. We're going to have inquiries, more puratim. When is it three? When perhaps is it not three? Big nafkamina, shikha, versus if it's not shikha. If you remember, I'm saying this because we took up learning after Pesach, Tafshan Pei Dalet. We have to push it to remember. And Daf Nun Beis, the Mishnah gave the three cases where Beishamai and Beisilo both agree that there's no shikha. The final case, the third case, is ha'omer shehechzik b'ilo helicha Elohim, which means that the person who was gathering the oimarim picked up an oimer to bring it to the big pile, but when he picked it up, he said, "This I'm going to take to the city." Since this he's taking to the city, he put it on the side. Then he forgot to take it to the city, which means when he gathered it from its location, there was no shikha. He picked it up. Later, he forgot it in the field. So the Mishnah says that everyone agrees that it's not shikha. Now we're going to have, concerning this case, a braisa that's going to have a nuance, and we're going to link it with the Mishnah that we will learn, God willing, on Daf Nun Zayin Amid Beis, which will be the question of Tamun. Do we apply the law of Tamun when it comes to shikha or not? We'll see. It's a machlekes Chachamim and Rabbi Yehuda, and we're going to have a Rab Ze'eda that we quoted on Daf Mem Zayin. This will be the topic that we will have on Daf Nun Dalid Amid Aleph, on Daf Nun Dalid Amid Beis, up until the new Mishnah. We're going to start today, God willing, the next Mishnah, Halacha Dalid. What the Mishnah will be doing, the Mishnah is going to be speaking out the rule of 2 versus 3, right? If you forgot 2, shikha. If you forgot 3 or more, it's not shikha. Shikha. And the Mishnah will speak out that the same exact law we have by peret, the same exact law we have by leket, 2 versus 3, and then the Mishnah will conclude to tell you that all of this is shitas Beisilo. Beishamai goes with 3 versus 4. In other words, Beishamai, even if you forget 3, even if there was 3 grapes that fell down, even if 3 ears dropped out of the hand when you were gathering it, leket, 3, yes, shikha. 4 is not shikha. Benegeya the din, we're going to get to that, God willing, that by peret means that individual grapes, if 2 grapes fall when you harvest a cluster, peret, you have to leave it for the aniyim. If 3, it's not peret. You got to keep it. We're going to learn in a braisa that even if a half of a cluster is on the ground, even if a whole cluster is on the ground, but it became disconnected, it all has to be left for the poor. In our Mishnah, it says only 2. The Gemara is going to tell you a gavaldik din. And we had this concept before. If you remember, the importance of not making it difficult for the aniyim to get their matanas. One of the things that the balabas might do that will make it difficult is by covering it. When people harvest clusters, sometimes they want to put it on the ground, which would have been okay. It's not okay, because the peret, if there is peret, it's going to be right under the vine. That's where it might fall. The Chachamim said, if you, after harvesting a cluster, if you put it on the ground, if after you put it on the ground, it somehow opens up and falls apart, now it became dismembered, midarabanan, all of them are la'aniyim. Gezerah, like it's a knas. Why did you hide the perhaps perets by putting your cluster? That will explain the braisa that says, even though it's more 3 or more, it's still going to be peret. That's more or less going to be today's daf. Without any further ado, Chavre, let's learn this inside. Rabbi Yehuda Beribi. I mean, the word Beribi means the great Rabbi Yehuda. Maybe this is Rabbi Yehuda Rabbi Loi, which the Rosh Hamadabrim. Sometimes we'll call him Rabbi Yehuda Stam. Okay, Rabbi Yehuda Beribi Yoimen. Maybe it's Rabbi Yehuda HaKadosh, I don't know. That ho yosham amas hamayim al penei kol hasadem. We're going back to the rule of 3. If you forgot 3, which are in a row, it's not shikha. What happens if you have a stream of water that are separating the 3? So here you go, guys, just to have the image. The stream of water goes over here. Goes this way. In other words, when you're going to pick it up, you can jump over the stream of water, which is what you did. But you forgot 1, you forgot 2. Well, I'm not going to say 1 because 1 is the top of the row. Top of the row is never shikha. You forgot 2, you forgot 3, you forgot 4. But there was an amas hamayim separating. Does the amas hamayim interrupt the 3, or does it not interrupt the 3? Simple. So here he made a simple statement that if when you're plowing in that area, the width of the stream of water is so wide that you can't plow through it. You have to stop by the edge of one side. You have to lift up the plow. You have to walk it over and place it down. Then the amas hamayim is an interruption on the three. And this is to the detriment of the balabas. This is good for the mitzvah. In other words, you forgot three, but you didn't forget three. You forgot two, and you forgot one. However, okay. Now that's the end of the brais. Now the Gemara has a boyim. What happens if you harvested half of a row? Let's say you have 10 bundles, 10 sheaves on every row, and we're going to learn pshat over here, as the Maharafulda says explicitly, and it became night, and that's why you stopped. Even though we're going to have in the Gemara itself a scenario, according to the way we will be goyres, that some people, when it got dark, they would bring torches. Today we have electricity. Today, just because it's dark at night, doesn't stop anyone from anything. Then, not everyone had access to that. So he stopped in the middle of the road. He comes tomorrow, and he begins in middle. So the question is, do we say he began in the middle? Do we say he began in the new row? Why am I asking that? The first case on the Mishnah Daf Nun Beis was the rule that the Rashi Shurais, if you forget the first on a row, even though you forgot it, it's not shikha. Like we explained, you harvest, you're gathering, and then you forgot, you didn't begin to harvest it. Now, it's not in the top, it's not Roish, but for you, it's Roish, because you began from here. So we're saying here, since that's for sure, that's not a boy. Since you made an interruption during the night, the middle of the row is for you the beginning of the row. That's vadai. However, what happens if you harvested 1, 2, 3, 4, your middle of the row, you're gathering the oimarim, yoshav lecho. You didn't make an interruption of a whole night. You sat down to eat. Or yoshav lishan, you sat down to chapasnus. Or karoloi chaveiroi, so your friend is schmoozing with you, and it's not that you're having this 8-hour conversation. How long? I don't know. But there was some sort of hefsek. Now, if you're going to have the words chashecha, unlike the word chashecha before, so just to know that the Rash Sirilio is going to be goyres, that if it got dark, and I'm reading inside the Rash Sirilio on the right side, I think it's like 7 lines from the bottom, the hitlik neg, like we mentioned. It got dark. You went to get torches to be able to continue to gather, and you came back with the torches. So actually, your interruption was l'tzoyrach, the gathering. Many times we have in the Su'udah, if you make a hefsek, was it l'tzoyrach? If you made hamoitzi, and then you said that bring the salt, it's not a hefsek. So in other words, you made an interruption, but it's not such a big interruption. In all of these cases, Yerushalmi, the Gemara doesn't speak out both sides. The Gemara means to say, I don't know whether the resumption in middle is considered new, and if it's considered new and you forget the first of that middle, the first of your resumption, then it won't have a din of shikha because of Rashi Yashuvais. Or do we say, no, you are in the middle of a row, and if you forget 1 or 2, then yes, it will have a din of shikha. So again, this is an inquiry that remains unresolved. And now, as we spoke out in our Hagdama, the last sugya that we had, and whoever came now on board, remember the din of tamun. Tamun means that perhaps, as we'll see, if a sheaf, an oimer, was hidden and you forgot it, it b'chlal won't have the din of shikha. Now, really, on Daf Mem Zayin, we learned about it. We're going to comment back to it. This is really connected to a Mishnah that we're going to have later. But the Gemara opens up a new topic, quoting a brais. What we're learning now is a brais. So this is the third case in the Mishnah on Daf Nun Beis, right? When you're gathering the bundles, you did not forget it. You picked it up. But instead of you bringing it to the big pile, you decided this one you're going to take to the city. You put it aside. You didn't forget it. But where did you put it aside? You put it on top of another bundle. So now let's speak about the bundle that you picked up. We're going to call bundle number 1. You're going to take it to the city. You needed to put it somewhere. You put it on bundle 2. 1 is on top of 2. Now 2 is tamun. You can't see it. And then you forgot both. And there's going to be a very important nuance that the Gemara will speak out in a moment. That we quoted above. So let's go. The bottom one, the one that you never picked up before. The bottom one, according to the Chachamim, is Shikha. Now hold on, guys. There's a big chiddush here. What's the big chiddush? As we'll speak out, there's a Mishnah that we're going to have on Daf Nun Zayin. Machloikes Tanoim. The Chachamim hold that even though the bottom one is covered, it's still subject to Shikha. We're going to tweak it in a moment. There's a very important tweak. Rabbi Yehuda holds, and we had that general din before, that we don't say that. Rabbi Yehuda in the Mishnah later. Here it will be Rav Shimon. That since the bottom one was hidden, it's not shaykh for you to forget it and have the din of shikha. You forgot it because it was hidden. It's Talmud. So the Chachamim hold the bottom one is shikha. In other words, the Chachamim over here are paskening in accordance to the Chachamim on the Mishnah and Daf Nun Zayin. Now we're going to have to make another detail which is very important. But the top one is not shikha. Now why is the top one not shikha? Guys, there's 2 reasons, not 1 reason. Reason number 1, because the third case in the Mishnah and Daf Nun Beis is this case, that Omer shenatoli lo hilicha le'ir, and then you forget it, it's not shikha. But there's another reason, and that's why we made the chazorah. What's the other reason, my friends? Saf. Saf means we view the top one that it's floating in the air. It's not on the ground. Just like we said before by the Egla Rufa. Something that's floating, according to this Braisa, is not subject to shikha. You didn't forget a bundle on the field. You forgot a bundle that's on top. Now, even though it's min b'minoi, but that will be another reason that they're saying over here, b'shitas chachamim in the Brais. Which is, in other words, the Elyon ain't a shikha for 2 reasons. As I state, that is what we have over here in the Noise Kalim. Look inside the Rasharilia all the way in the bottom. Right, there's 3 lines from the bottom on the right side. The Elyon and the shikha. Hashta mashma for 2 reasons. Oy mishum the Zajac boy meikara, which is the case in the Mishnah on Daf Nun Beis. The loyhava shikuach meikara kedatram mastis and the Zajac boy loylicha leir. Afa pishoni chavitzad hagadish loyhava shikach Rabbi Yeshua. 1 reason b'shitas chachamim, or there's another reason. In other words, there's 2 reasons. And what's the second reason? Mishum tzaf. Okay, connected to the Sugya and Daf Nun Gimel Amud Beis. Now, back inside the Braisa, Rab Shimon Omer, you forgot both bundles. Tanakama holds Tachta and Shikha. That's the Chiddush. Rab Shimon says, Shnei Meine Shikha. The bottom one is not Shikha because it is Mechusa. Again, in the Mishnah and Daf Nun Zayin, Rabbi Yehuda holds, and we had that Shita before Adaf Mem Zayin, that anything that is Mechusa, we had the word that we used before is tamun, not shaykh to shikha. It's not subject to shikha. B'chlal. And the Elyon, mipnei shezacha boy, because you already acquired it. That's our Mishnah and Daf Nun Beis. So we have a machlokes Chachamim and Rab Shimon. Now, Chevra, we quoted this Rab Zera above on Daf Mem Zayin. Here we have the source, Rab Zera Oimer. I want you to know that the Tanakama, the Chachamim, will agree with Rab Shimon that what? That even the Tachtoin, he'll agree, won't be Shikha b'zoicher esa Elyon. If a person remembered that there is the top sheet, they didn't pick it up, but they knew it's there. If they knew it's there, the Chachamim will also agree with Rabbi Yehuda that if he walked by it, the bottom one won't be shikha. Why? Because he didn't forget the bottom one. There was an external factor, the Elyon, that was blocking the Tachton. Where do the Chachamim argue with Rab Shimon when this person forgot both? Which means the reason why he forgot the bottom one wasn't because it was covered. He didn't go there at all. He forgot both of them. That's why the Chachamim hold he would have forgotten it anyways, The Chachamim in the Mishnah Daf Nun Zayin don't say that anything that's mechusa is never subject to shikha. They hold it is subject to shikha. That's what Rabbi Zajac is saying. That the Zoicheres Elyon means that the Tanakama, the Chachamim, will agree with Rab Shimon that only by Zoicher Elyon. So why did he forget the bottom one? You can argue because it covered it. He saw the top, he didn't see the bottom. Where does he disagree? Only where he forgot both. Yovaldik. And now, turning to Daf Nun Daled and Beis, this is just referring back to what we had on Daf Mem Zayin, that Asya, that Rab Zajac, what Rab Zajac says over here on this Braisa is mamish that which we learned above, that which Rabbi Yoina said. Rabbi Yoina spoke about a case where you have straw that's covering Oymarim. Same thing, straw. Is it subject to Shikha? Is it not subject to Shikha? So he clarified that when do we say that the bottom one, that which is covering, is Shikha? When you remember the straw, I'm sorry, that's where we say it's not. When you remember the straw, you know straw is there. So I can argue that which is under the straw is not Shikha. You forgot it. I didn't forget it. Something was obscuring it from my vision, some external factor. Masha'enkin, if a person forgot that whole part of the field, he forgot that the straw there, he never went to. That means even if there would not have been straw, he would have forgotten it anyways, then it is Shikha. That same concept. What Rabbi Yoina said on Daf Mem Zayin is exactly Cain, Rab Ze'era, Omer over here, that even the Tanakama will agree with Rab Shimon, in that case, the bottom one will not be Shikha, because everyone ascribes that if something external, obscured, hid my vision from the bundle, that's not called forgetting. Forgetting means that it's revealed. I forgot. Okay. And finally, the Gemara gives a Gavaldic thing. Michelle, we're speaking about a person who's gathering bundles. They forgot. So here there's a row, my beautiful painting of it is beautiful. And he picked up this, he picked up this, he forgot this. Then he went to the next. The Torah says, don't go back. Don't go back. That's what leave it for the poor. What happens if whoever placed the bundles on the ground did not place it in a line? It's bagunçado in Portuguese. It's a mess. It's all over the place. Which means that if you're not going on an order, if you forgot one, you can't say, don't go back to that one. You're not going on a line for you to have to go back. Shikha will work completely different. But when there is a line, if I just passed over it to the next, it's already Shikha, because now I have to go back. If the person who placed the bundles on the ground placed it me'urbavin, they are completely unorganized, disorganized, they're not placed in a row. And then the person who was gathering it, the shachach echad mihem, you can't say that it's shikha because he forgot one or he went over one. The whole thing is disorganized. When do we say, "Ooh, don't go back to get it"? If all of the sheaves around it, disorganized, were picked up, and that one that used to be, so to say, in the middle, that was forgotten, then you can say, now you're going back. Look inside the top marafulda, the second one on the Amid, on the top line, that in other words, shikha kicks in when the lav is applicable. The lav is don't go back. If they're not laid out in rows, okay. Moving on now to the new Mishnah, to Halacha Daled. The Mishnah is going to reiterate the Halacha of 2 verses 3. When you're gathering the sheaves, if you forget 1 or 2, yes, that is the din of Shikha. But the moment you forgot 3, which is considered a row, meaning it belongs to the Balabas. Continues the Mishnah, just like we have by ears, just like we have by produce, 2 times for shikha to be possible. One is when you are harvesting it. So if you walk by, you're taking bundles, you're cutting it, chopping a bundle, cutting it. If you went by a bundle, it's called shikchas kama, it's still connected, and you forgot it, you have to leave that. So there's the forgetting of that which is standing, and then shikchas oimed when it's bundled. Same thing will be in fruits in certain cases. L'mashal, the way it would work by olives and by carob, by bakser, by charuvim, is that they would gather the olives. There would be some sort of pile near the tree. Then they would walk by and they would gather all of these piles and they would put it into one huge pile. So just like there's shikha, we learned before, when you're harvesting the olive tree, if a person walked by a tree, he skipped the tree, he forgot the tree, he didn't harvest any of it, that is called shikha, we learned before. If he went by it, however you define that, can he stretch his hand back? Did he go on to the next tree? At some point, don't go back. That's to the connected olives. The same thing says the Mishnah. If you have a pile, now it has to be a pile that's full. And the final step will be gathering all of these piles to bring it into the big pile that you're making. Same rule. So if you had two piles, two heaps of either olives or two piles of charuvim, and you walked by it, and you forgot to pick it up to bring it into the final pile, that is the din of shikha. It's going to be similar to shikchas oimer, amazing, by fruits. If you forgot three or more, same rule, shloisha eina shikha. The next din in the Mishnah, shnei hutznei pishton, if you have two bundles of cut flax, same thing. That shikchas, this is shikchas oimer by flax. Flax is what they would make cloth out of, exactly. What they would make linen out of. So linen is not a chai. It doesn't come from an animal. It's a plant. So they would harvest it. They would make bundles, and then they would go again and they would pick up all the bundles together. If you forget two, shikha. But if you forgot three or more, ain't a shikha. So Atkan, the Mishnah is really, we know this, but we don't know this because we never spoke out that just like by produce, by grain, there's two shikchas, kama, and oimer, you have the same thing, whether it is by the flax, whether it is by the fruits. There are different phases where it's shayach to be shikha. Now we're going to move on to a din called peret. Maza peret. Peret means this is specific to a vineyard. That when you are harvesting grapes, you are harvesting clusters. You take the cluster off the vine. When you take the cluster off, sometimes one grape falls off. Two grapes can fall off. So the rule is, if one or two fall off at the same time, that you have to leave on the ground for the poor. It's called peret. If three or more fall off, then you get to keep it. Shnei gargerim, then peret. But if it's shloisha, but if it's three, einoi peret. I just want to emphasize that it's three falling simultaneously. Now the Gemara is going to ask, how would you know that? If they don't fall at the same time, because when you handle clusters, sometimes one or two, if one can fall off now and then you handle it again, then all of it has to be left, even though you have now three or more. When is three not to be left to the poor if they fall off at the same time, as we'll see more details in the Gemara? Shnei shibalim, when you're gathering in your hand a cluster of standing grain, and then you are cutting it. So as we said, while you are cutting that bundle, sometimes ears fall out of your hand. One hand, you grab a bundle, a bunch. The other hand, you have the sickle. And during that process of you cutting it, if one or two fell, you leave it. That's called leket. If three or more, then you get to keep it. Shnei shivalim leket. Shloisha leket. All of these are the Mishnahs. However, regarding all of these cases, even when there are three, it still has to be left for the aniyim. Only if you have four, that's good. That's true for shikha and for peret and for leket. Sets of three belong to the poor. And as we said, the reason why this Mishnah is not mentioned in Masechta Zeiduyos, because you can argue that Beishamai over here is good for the aniyim. He's kal la'aniyim. But Beishamai is chamur l'balabayis. Okay. Says the Gemara. Rabbi Bun Barachia b'Shem Rabbi Yechanan. What happens? This rule of three. You forgot three, but they were not in a row. Asa on Kimin Gam. If they were on the field like the Greek gamma letter, which is like a inverted L. And for people that are using the art scroll, look at the bottom right, and it's either or. It's either or. I don't care if it's point is it's like this. I like this, or it's like this. No, you forgot three, but they're not in a row. It's in a basic 45 angle, right? That's what it's called, or a 90 angle. It's L, a gamma. That's the gamma. That's the gimel that they had over there. We don't know. We don't know whether that's called forgetting. Maybe not, because you have, in whichever direction you're looking, you have only two. Right? If you top down, there's only two. Right, left, there's only two. Even though you forgot three, maybe it's considered two. That question remains unanswered. Now, I know that there's going to be a piece of Gemara later that is going to look similar to this, but we'll get there in a moment, and we're going to clarify, God willing, properly. Shnei tziburi zeisim, if you have two heaps of olives or two heaps of carobs, and when you're gathering the heaps that are under the trees to bring them into one huge heap of the whole field, this is mamish like the gathering of the oimarim, of the bundles of the sheaves. If you forget it, again, two shikha, three not shikha. Says the Gemara, Lo Yomar El Tziburim. When we're giving this concept of shikha by fruits, not only when it's connected, but even when it's, so to say, gathered together, that's dafke if they were gathered in a heap. Hazeisim. But if you forget individual grapes, all right, if a farmer forgets to collect one or two individual olives, not grapes, olives, it's not shikha. It's very important. So yes, just like you have by sheaves, similarly by fruits, the example here will be olives and or carobs, you have shikha at 2 points, but not in 3 points, not in 4 points. So it's either you forgot a whole tree, similar to shikha's kama, or you already made it into a heap, and now you forgot the whole heap. But before you made it into a heap, if you forget one or two when you're picking them up, that's not called shikha. And why? Says the Gemara, because when they were already piled in a heap, they are now at a point where we call them Gemar Malacha, very similar to having a bundle. When you have an oimer, that's the Gemar Malacha. If you forget the bundle when you're gathering it, taka, that's called shikha. But if you didn't yet even put it in a heap, it's called nishtahed or nishtahin, zaysim ene Gemar Malacha. Very good. Going back, now says the Gemara, Omar Rabbi Shayom. We had this before in Daf Mem Gimel. I was once treading olives together with Rabbi Chia the Great. And what do you think we do when we tread olives? We speak divrei Torah about the olives. So Omar Li, Rabbi Chia tells me, Kol Zayis, Shat Yochel Livshad Yotcha V'Liplay, that if you are picking a tree, right? You're plucking and you skip a tree. That's called shikha. When halachically you skipped it. What's halachically skipping it? Don't think just walking by it is called you forgot it. And going back will be going back. If where you are at, if you can lean back and your hand can still touch the tree, you didn't forget it. You didn't go by it yet. Going by it is you went so far away. If you can stretch your hand and still touch that tree, it's not shikha. Shikha means, the Torah says, don't return. That's not called returning. We gave a mashal when we went to this above. We went to some daf mem, I think the daf mem gimel. You know the concept of toichel dibur. Sometimes when you made a statement, if you're still toichel dibur, you can go and retract it. It's not even called a retraction. However, we had this opinion before. This is the opinion of Rabbi Chia. The Gemara calls him the great Rabbi Chia. Rabbi Yechanan argues, Amar Rabbi Yechanan, no, mikiv and sha'avar Allah, u'shachachai, the moment you walk by something, you have your back towards it, harei hu sheikham. If you forget to compliment your wife, you right away make it up, no, doesn't work. That's the machlokes. It's too late. Mamish, yeah, we all know that. After Yontif especially. Okay, moving on. Says the Gemara, Shnei Gargarim, you have two fallen grapes. The Mishnah spoke about the dinim of peret, which are unique dinim when it comes to the harvesting of grapes. Clearly, three grapes are not going to be peret. Rabbi Lazar, b'shem Rabbi Chia Rabbah, he says a statement that appears to mamash contradict the Mishnah. Lazar did that chatzi yeshkoil. Even if you have half of the cluster that broke apart and it's on the ground, that is peret. More, not only chatzi eshkol, even if the whole eshkol. In other words, if on the ground, under the vines, many people went to a vineyard, under the vine where the clusters are growing, if you look on the ground, you can see a whole cluster dismembered. Even if it's a whole cluster, if it's on the ground, that is peret. That is befedish, not like the Mishnah. Now, Rabbi Lazar is an Amoira. That's even worse. At least, Tani Rabbi Chia, you can say maybe it's a Machloikas Tanoim, but it's not like the Gemara. The Gemara, V'hatani, here's our Mishnah. Only Shnei Gargarim peret, and not three, and not half, and not the whole. Says the Gemara, and there's no argument. It's not a Machloikas Tanoim to which Rabbi Lazar, b'shem Rabbi Chia Rabbah, is hiding with the Braisa. No. Rav Imi b'shem Rabbi Chia, and we spoke this out in our intro. This is a Gavaldik Din, and we will learn it as some learn it that this is a knas midrabanan b'koitzer umaniach tachas hagefen. When you harvest clusters, the Torah gives you the din of peret, which means that it's possible that under that vine, when you are harvesting one or two from each cluster that fell as peret, there could be peret lach under the vine for the aniyim. Now, many balabatim, when they harvest clusters, it's convenient for anyone working, common sense, to be able to use the land for your needs. Many times you'll pull a cluster off the tree, and you'll need to use your hands for something else. You'll want to put it on the ground. The Chachamim said, don't put it on the ground. Never put a cluster on the ground. Why? Because there might be a peret underneath, and your cluster will cover it. And if you put it on the ground, they didn't say that the cluster belongs to the aniyim. But if after you put it on the ground, that cluster broke apart, knas, all of the pieces, all of the grapes now belong to the aniyim. And that is the case of the Braisa, and that is the case of Rabbi Lazar b'shem Rabbi Chia. That if bekoitze, and after you cut it, you put a tachas hagefen, which you shouldn't have. And after you put a tachas hagefen, then the cluster fell apart, which can happen. It can happen when you pick it back up. Now you have to leave all of it, and we don't say, if it's more than two, it's yours. We don't say that. Whatever now is dismembered has to stay for the aniyim midrabanan.
Like if you covered also the shit.
We learned the same thing, the same idea. We had this concept of a knas. If you threw yourself on it,
if you cover it or the wind blows out.
Very good. Now, I know that there are different ways of learning this, like always. We will not learn it, whoever uses the art scroll, we will not learn it like the art scroll. I'm just saying another option. We're going to learn it the way the Rash Cirilio at the end learns it. The Rash Cirilio is going to be understanding Hoyu Asuyim Kimin Sin point, that's behemshich to the din that we just spoke about, which is peret. When we said in the Mishnah, and just to reiterate, that three grapes are not to be left for the aniyim, are not peret, it's only if all three fell off at the same time. And according to the Rash Cirilio, the real question that we are addressing indirectly, how do you know whether they fell off at the same time or not? Or if they didn't fall off at the same time, when I picked up the cluster, two fell off. And then at another moment, another one fell off. And then at another moment, another one fell off. All of them have to be laniyim. Three you get to keep as if they fell off at the same time. How would you know that? So he understands pshat that if not, according to the Rash Cirilio, we're speaking about grapes, that if the grapes on the ground, they are arranged like a branch, which means that they are somewhat together. One is here, one is here, one is there. You look at it, it looks like a branch. You have a shaila in your mind. Did they fall off together? Did they not fall off together? That's the way he learns pshat. Look inside the Rash Cirilio, 5 lines on the bottom of the left column. Nira lefarish, that they looked somewhat connected. sin point means a branch. The point is that it's like they are connected. Guys, we're going to read the parentheses. You see that? We're going to skip the brackets. And if that would be the case, then you get to keep it. It's not petted. Or maybe shnayim bikan, the echad bikan, and sin point means like a snip. In other words, it's somewhat attached. You don't know whether it fell off together, then you get to keep it, whether two fell off and then another one fell off, two from one cluster, maybe another one from another. You don't know that. So the Gemara is going to tell you a chiddush that you look at the stems, and if the stems look alike, we presume that they fell off at the same time from the same cluster. The way, the size of the stem, because however they fall off, you are handling it in a certain way. It's like almost like a common sense. It makes sense that whatever movement you made that caused individual grapes to fall off the cluster, the same koyach would make them disconnect the same way. So if they look disconnected the same, we presume they fell off the same time, and then you get to keep it. If the uktzin, that's the way he learns pshat, if the stems are of different sizes, it doesn't, circumstantial evidence, they didn't fall off with the same koyach, they didn't fall off at the same time and treat it inside. So Menachem, b'shem Rabbi Yonason, v'hu, that's a response to Asim Kamin sin point, sheyehei choischon b'shaveh, says the Rashirilio. Look inside the second to last line. The basar oitzeyon ozlinim. Look at their stems. Im chatuchem b'shaveh. If they look same, so then we say that ka'achas naflu. And since there are three, the havu, the balabites. But the imlav, so it's not the way they are positioned on the ground, but you see the grape versus the cluster, how are they disconnected? Don't forget, the owner did not take them off. They fell off by themselves. So there's a stem, there's something. If the stems are the same, they fell off together. If the stems are disliked, then we presume they did not fall off together. And even though you have three, it's not three. It was two and then one, or two and then two. And all of them belong to the Aniyim. We'll stop over here. God willing, to be continued. Yes.
Why is there such a discussion whether or not to keep the grape?
One second. Danny, you're here? Yeah. So you love it. What was that?